Toby Walters was the kind of street performer who thrived on the smallest rush of applause. Strangers' smiles and the jingle of loose change in his battered guitar case reminded him that, despite life's hardships, small bursts of joy still existed. He had lived his entire life in this little town, with its peeled paint on old storefronts and a sidewalk that needed repairs at every turn. Yet, even with the slow crumble of buildings and the weight everyone seemed to be carrying, Toby loved Main Street. It was a place of memories for him: summer festivals with cotton candy stands in the square, kids parading around in paper hats after the annual 4th of July event. But lately, the spirit of the town had all but vanished, replaced by vacant windows and subdued sighs from passersby. As Toby strummed his guitar on a windy midweek afternoon, the sound was met with polite but perfunctory smiles. By the end of his simple tune, he found a single crumpled dollar beside a few coins in his case, and his heart sank a bit. Nevertheless, Toby remained, leaning forward on his stool, as though each note might magically summon back the crowds. He saw a few people peeking from behind curtains of half-closed blinds, as if they wanted to enjoy the music but were too worried or tired to come out. Toby had never witnessed the town in such a slump. The local bakery, once famous for strawberry pies, now only opened 3 nights a week. The tailor's shop had a closed sign up more often than not, and the mayor's once cheerful face had settled into a permanent frown. In Toby's mind, a little music went a long way, so he pressed on, ignoring the bite of the brisk wind and the ache in his fingers as he strummed. He still believed in the power of small wonders, even if he rarely saw them these days. That afternoon, an old RV rattled into town, its colorful paint half washed off by years of travel. Toby, whose curiosity always got the better of him, strained to see who was driving. As the vehicle passed in front of him, he caught a glimpse of a bright red nose attached to a man in baggy, striped pants, punching the horn repeatedly in a comedic honk-honk sequence. This whimsical sight was enough to halt Toby's strumming for a moment. Clowns weren't exactly standard fare in a place like Mapleworth. City folks might get used to glimpsing performers on the subway or random costumed characters in tourist squares, but in this quiet hamlet, seeing a clown was like a hint of magic drifting down from the sky. He picked up his guitar case and slung it over his shoulder, following the RV as it pulled into a small lot near the abandoned railroad tracks. The vehicle hissed, coughed, and then came to a rest. A moment later, out stepped the clown, flamboyant but disheveled, pulling out boxes and crates. With a bright checkered jacket flapping in the breeze, the clown made a quick attempt at stacking the crates in some orderly fashion, but they all toppled, nearly squashing his big toe in the process. Toby rushed over, proving once again that he was guided by the desire to help anyone who might need it. "Need a hand?" Toby approached cautiously, unsure if clowns liked unexpected conversation or assistance. The clown looked up, eyebrows arching in mild surprise beneath his painted white face. "It'd be a lifesaver," the clown replied, adjusting the gigantic red nose that threatened to slip off. "Name's Sylvester Sill for short. Been traveling up and down the state with the last remnants of the esteemed Magnifico Circus." He swept one arm dramatically across his chest as though introducing the greatest show on earth. "We're setting up camp here for a few days, or maybe weeks, we'll see." Together they gathered the boxes, which Toby realized were filled with all manner of clowning gear: silly hats, squirting flowers, and bright face paints in chipped plastic containers. Sylvester thanked Toby by tipping his miniature top hat, which was pinned by an invisible thread to his hair. "So, who might you be?" "I'm Toby," the busker answered. "I strum on Main Street, juggle a bit too. Really, I do whatever I can to put a smile on people's faces." "Well, Toby, you've found a kindred spirit. Smiles are my currency," Sylvester said, adjusting his suspenders with an eager grin. The lines around his eyes told a story of many miles traveled, many days of comedic hijinks, and perhaps even a few nights of loneliness. "I sense a bit of gloom around this town. Maybe it just needs something spontaneous, something to bring folks together again." Toby chewed on his lower lip, gazing into the distance, where rows of empty shops lined the street. This place has had it rough lately. Layoffs at the factory, businesses closing, families moving away. It's broken more hearts than I can count. I don't know if you've ever felt that kind of sadness, but it's like a thick fog around here. People hardly remember what it's like to laugh. Sylvester pointed to the scattered props around him. How about we remind them? He asked. The suggestion felt so simple, but something about Sylvester's confidence kindled a small flame in Toby's chest. What say we team up for a few days, do some impromptu shows right out there on Main Street? We'll juggle flaming torches, do comedic skits, maybe perform some music. They worked out the details under the glow of a street lamp since the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The cool air kept them awake and sharp. Sylvester described illusions that could be done with minimal setup, while Toby offered up the idea of blending clown humor with melodic busking. By the time they shook hands, they planned to bring a taste of circus magic to corners of the street where gloom had settled. Toby's heart fluttered with anticipation. After months of near-empty tip jars, he couldn't wait to see whether a little fun could help turn things around. The next day, just as the sun lit up the edge of the sky, Toby and Sylvester launched their grand scheme. Toby started strumming before the bakery's chipped wooden door, while Sylvester unicycled around him, red nose wiggling, arms flapping about in exaggerated gestures. At first, the few passers-by headed toward the hardware store raised skeptical eyebrows, but soon, a curious child tugged at their mother's sleeve, giggling as Sylvester raised one giant clown shoe high in the air, only to dramatically topple off the unicycle on purpose, of course, into a pile of imaginary bananas. The child squealed in delight. The mother, though cautious, cracked a smile. Toby seized the moment, switching to a folksy tune with a jaunty tempo. More heads turned. Within minutes, the jingle of the guitar merged with bursts of applause. Samantha, the bakery owner, peered through her dusty window. She hadn't planned on opening that morning. Her battered finances couldn't justify baking if no one came, but as she watched Toby and Sylvester draw a small crowd, a hopeful stirring rose in her chest. If a crowd was forming, maybe they'd be hungry for something warm and sweet. She flipped the sign to open and quickly rushed to the ovens, starting the batter for a fresh batch of scones. Outside, Toby called for volunteers from the growing circle around them. He needed a fearless assistant for the next act. A young boy marched forward, hair sticking up in all directions, eyes shining with excitement. Sylvester handed him a feather duster and pretended to misplace the juggling balls, rummaging in an oversized suitcase of comedic props. Finally, he found the balls, lodged inside an equally oversized clown hat. The laughter was immediate. When the performance ended, 10 minutes later, Toby was breathless, bowing before people who hadn't shown more than a passing interest in him for months. Sylvester honked a small horn merrily. To Toby's surprise, pockets unzipped and coins were tossed into his guitar case. More than a few folks meandered into the bakery, lured by the smell of fresh dough rising. Samantha, wearing a flower-streaked apron, came out to pass around free samples of warm scones, and the crowd's mild amusement grew into genuine cheer. Some clapped Toby on the shoulder, others shook Sylvester's hand, praising the performance and asking if there would be more. Word traveled like electricity. Over the next few days, the town buzzed with speculation, which only gained speed as Toby and Sylvester popped up in unexpected places. One morning, they set up near the old train station, playing wide-grinned comedic sketches as workers filed out of the local bus. Another time, they did a juggling routine outside the toy shop, colored balls soaring above the dull gray sidewalk. Children pointed and squealed with laughter, and for the first time in ages, the toy shop owner sold a few items. Time after time, the odd duo conjured pockets of brightness wherever they went. They performed so spontaneously that it felt like a magical chance to see them. The sense of playful unpredictability kept the townspeople guessing, fueled chatter at the diner, and even coaxed a grin from the usually stern-faced police chief. With each performance, Toby felt his own spirit revitalizing. The heaviness that had cloaked the streets began to dissipate. Where once there was skepticism and weariness, now Toby saw pockets of genuine interest, even hope. He loved how Sylvester's comedic presence complemented his music, and Sylvester, in turn, found Toby's earnest devotion to the town refreshing. In the evenings, they'd share stories over slices of cherry pie at the local diner, strategizing their next day's show and swapping tales of their lives. Sylvester, whose parents had been circus performers, had known no other existence than traveling from place to place, spreading chaos and cheer, as he called it. Toby told him about Mapleworth's storied traditions, now on the brink of being lost. Hearing this, Sylvester vowed in earnest to do whatever it took to bring that sparkle back. But not everyone was quite so dazzled. A handful of local officials, including Councilwoman Brenner, frowned upon these unscheduled events. They argued that these pop-up spectacles interfered with daily commerce and city ordinances. Meeting behind closed doors, the officials muttered that Toby and Sylvester ought to apply for proper permits, that there needed to be an established time and place for performances. It was never that Mapleworth was anti-entertainment, they claimed, but the unpredictability, the laughter, the silly commotion, somehow it upset the town's carefully regulated calm. Or so the officials insisted. One windy morning, as Sylvester prepared a water-squirting flower routine outside the antique shop, Councilwoman Brenner marched over, her lips pursed tight. Toby, already holding his guitar, waited expectantly. She wasted no time delivering her rebuke. "We appreciate the spirit," she said in a stern voice, "but you're causing crowds to gather where it's not safe. People are standing in the street, blocking traffic. We cannot allow these impromptu acts to continue. If you must entertain, you need to file the appropriate forms and wait for the city clerk's approval." Brenner handed them a thick stack of paperwork. Toby frowned, and Sylvester's red nose appeared to droop a little, as if sharing in the disappointment. They both knew the process for acquiring permits involved waiting, fees, and an uncertain approval timeline. "Ma'am," Toby began, struggling to remain polite, "I understand the concern, but we're just trying to bring some joy back to Main Street." Councilwoman Brenner's eyes flickered with something a softening, perhaps, but her tone remained stubborn. "I'm sorry, but rules are rules. Safety and order must be maintained." Then she strode off, leaving Toby and Sylvester holding the forms in silence. They retreated to the diner to nurse cups of coffee while gloom settled over them. Filing permits would halt their spontaneity, which was half the magic. They feared they'd be turned down anyway, and in the meantime, they'd have to stop. Toby rubbed the back of his neck, wondering if they had already done enough to spark the community's renewed spirit. Maybe it would hold on its own. Later that afternoon, the town's mood seemed to dip again, as though the fleeting carnival atmosphere had been chased away by regulations and stern glances. The next morning, Toby learned that Councilwoman Brenner and the other officials had voted to block any performances until the forms could be reviewed. This left Toby pacing the sidewalk, feeling a twinge of defeat. He understood the officials' perspective, but it still rubbed him the wrong way. That was when a surprising voice rose to their defense. Samantha, the baker, who marched into a town council meeting and explained how the spontaneous shows had given her bakery an unexpected boost. "It's the first time I've sold out my pastries in months," she declared, "and people are actually looking happier. Are we really going to let a few bits of paperwork stand in the way of that?" Another shopkeeper, the toy shop owner, spoke of children returning to Main Street with bright eyes. Parents who'd once hurried by, heads down, now lingered to chat while their kids played. Smaller voices joined in. Tuscan residents, even an older retired teacher who enjoyed the stolen moment of whimsy she felt each time Toby struck up a tune and Sylvester honked his horn. Listening to this outpouring, Brenner's stern mask began to crack. She asked, "But how do we ensure order?" And the crowd responded that perhaps the duo could coordinate in certain areas, keep the sidewalks clear. A compromise might be found. Yet Brenner insisted on seeing Toby and Sylvester express a willingness to meet her halfway. When Toby got wind of it, he wasn't certain what steps to take next. Meanwhile, Sylvester had an idea. "The entire esteemed Magnifico Circus is traveling back through in a couple of days," he told Toby with a grin. "We could put on a show that invites the entire town. We'll direct the crowds properly so no one's blocking traffic. We'll follow the guidelines, but still bring a bit of magic. Maybe then we'll show Brenner and the others that we can do this in a safe, organized way without losing our spirit." Toby lit up at the suggestion, though a spark of apprehension lingered. What if no one came? Or worse, what if the city folk took offense to an entire circus? But Sylvester's optimism proved contagious, and Toby found himself nodding. Yes, a grand show might just be the reminder Mapleworth needed, a final push to revive community pride. So they spent the next 2 days plastering colorful flyers all over town, each sharing details about a night of magic on Main Street. They promised acrobatics, clown skits, juggling acts, and of course, Toby's music. The city council didn't forbid them outright, provided they set up barriers to keep the streets open for first responders and abide by crowd control regulations. Word spread like wildfire, the curiosity stoked by Toby and Sylvester's earlier appearances. People were starved for entertainment, for that sense of belonging, for a reason to gather without reservations. Kids asked parents, neighbors asked neighbors, and soon preparations were in full swing. The battered old esteemed Magnifico Circus caravan rolled into Mapleworth, parking in a vacant lot near the foreign car dealership. The performers poured out in a flurry of color, tightrope walkers, jugglers, contortionists, and, of course, more clowns. Sylvester introduced Toby to each performer in turn, proud to share this new friend who had helped redeem his faith in the power of spontaneous wonder. On the twilight of the big event, storefronts along Main Street lit up with Christmas-like strings of lights, even though it was only early autumn. The town felt festive in a way it hadn't in years. Parents shepherded children down sidewalks lined with bright chalk drawings that Toby and Sylvester had worked on all morning. Shopkeepers kept their doors open late, offering free cookies or discounted items to anyone wandering by. A lively hum resonated in the air, building anticipation for the show. Then it began. The ringmaster's booming voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to our extraordinary spectacle." A spotlight improvised from a borrowed construction lamp swept across the street, shining on the tall figure in a red tailcoat with a gold-trimmed top hat. Sylvester, Toby, and the other clowns tumbled out into the open to start their comedic opening routine. Their flamboyant mischief had the kids roaring with laughter in no time, especially when Sylvester tripped over Toby's guitar case with a cartoonish flourish. Next came the acrobats, flipping and spinning on a makeshift stage set up in the old town square. Gasps rippled through the crowd as bodies soared and twirled against the backdrop of swirling colored lights. Toby provided a gentle guitar melody to accompany a balancing act, in which two performers built a human tower. The awe on people's faces told Toby they were seeing wonder again, perhaps for the first time in a decade. The crescendo peaked when the jugglers trotted out, torches lit, their arcs of fire dancing in the cool night air. Toby continued strumming, his notes mingling with the crackle of flames, the amazed cheers, and the ever-present squeak of clown horns. The entire street pulsed with energy, a living tapestry woven of color, music, and laughter. Councilwoman Brenner, who stood near the front, tried to maintain a composed expression, but there was a visible softening around her eyes. She joined in clapping when a gravity-defying handstand transition made the crowd roar. Finally, Toby and Sylvester took center stage for a duet. Toby strummed his guitar, singing a song he'd composed especially for the occasion, a gentle tune about a town rediscovering its heart. Sylvester punctuated verses with little comedic flourishes, a playful squeak of his nose, a cartwheel across stage, or a pantomimed sob of gratitude. The synergy between them was nothing short of electric, and the townspeople swayed along, some holding hands, children perched on shoulders to see better. The final chord hung in the air before the crowd erupted in thunderous applause. As the applause died down, Sylvester stepped forward, tears welling in his eyes beneath the clown paint. "This place reminds me of why I fell in love with circus life in the first place," he said, voice cracking slightly. "People aren't just hungry for food and money. They're hungry for joy, for connection, for remembering that miracles can still happen in the most unexpected places." He took off his clown hat and bowed to Toby. "This man here reminded me of that. Even when hope seemed lost on these streets he played on." Moved, Toby kept his guitar in hand, a faint tremor in his fingers. Normally he'd never speak before a crowd, but he cleared his throat. "All I ever wanted was for people to remember that we belong to each other. This town might be small, it might face struggles, but when we come together, He paused, swallowing emotion. We're unstoppable. In the hush that followed, no one coughed, no one fidgeted. A sense of unity blanketed them. With a final flourish, the performers all bowed as the streetlights glistened off tear-dropped eyes and overjoyed faces. With that, the esteemed Magnifico Circus show concluded, but its magic lingered well into the night, carried along by lingering conversations and murmurs of renewed hope. The next morning, Toby and Sylvester found Councilwoman Brenner outside the bakery. She seemed almost bashful as she approached. I won't lie, she said, looking between the two of them. I was skeptical at first, but last night it was remarkable. The entire council now sees that with the right measures in place, this type of performance can be a boon for Mapleworth. If you'd like, she paused, as though sifting through the old layers of her stern facade. Perhaps we can set up a more regular schedule of events with minimal red tape. Maybe some Saturday street performances or monthly mini festivals. Sylvester's bright nose twitched with excitement, and Toby felt a grin stretch across his face at the prospect. While Mapleworth might never become a bustling metropolis, it could certainly sustain a sense of wonder if people kept an open heart. They agreed to set up a modest plan, still spontaneous in spirit, but with enough structure to satisfy council regulations. The weeks passed, and Toby continued strumming on street corners. Sometimes Sylvester joined him, riding in on his unicycle, honking like a cartoon goose. Other times, Toby performed a solo set, weaving songs that the townspeople had come to cherish. And on special days, the other circus performers dropped by, giving the town little reminders of that unforgettable night. Little by little, businesses started reporting a slight uptick in foot traffic. A sense of liveliness returned to Main Street. Samantha sold out of pies more often than not these days, and the toy shops started stocking colorful yo-yos and model trains again. One crisp November morning, after Toby finished an upbeat tune outside the cafe, Sylvester took him aside. The circus caravan moves on tomorrow, he said, his voice hushed with something like sadness. We've been invited to another small town that's hurting, and I think it's time we brighten their world as well. Toby felt an ache in his chest, but he nodded. You've done so much here. You gave us the spark we needed to remember that life can still be full of fun and laughter. Sylvester hugged him with surprising warmth. Keep inspiring them with your music. And who knows, maybe our RV will roll back this way again soon. His eyes twinkled with promise. The next day, Toby stood at the edge of town, guitar strapped on his back, hat clutched in one hand. He watched as the colorful caravan of the esteemed Magnifico Circus pulled out, honking in comedic fanfare. Sylvester poked his head out a window, waving goodbye with a white-gloved hand, his red nose catchable from a mile away. That evening, Toby returned to Main Street, where the faint echoes of the circus's presence still seemed to glow from every storefront window. People recognized him now, not just as the solitary busker, but as half of the odd duo that had once spun an entire world of magic into being. Not wanting the night to end in melancholy, Toby sat on his old stool, flicked open his guitar case, and began to strum a gentle tune. And in true Mapleworth fashion, passers-by circled around, dropping coins, offering applause, but above all, sharing in a renewed sense of community. As Toby's chords floated through the crisp air, he knew that even though Sylvester and the circus had moved on, their shared creation, a living tapestry of joy, would remain part of Main Street's fabric for a long time to come. And so each new dawn found Toby at his station, greeting the sun with a melody that hinted at something whimsical just beyond the horizon. Some days, a random squeak of a clown horn or the vision of a giant red nose might flash in his memory, reminding him of his vibrant partner in laughter. But Toby never felt truly alone. He had learned that togetherness can spark entire worlds of laughter and hope, so long as people dare to step outside their comfort zones. And perhaps in those shining moments when the strings of his guitar reverberated with the footprints of memory, Mapleworth itself learned the true power of unity, that even humble acts and a little bit of clownish magic could rewrite despair into a story of possibility.